Beth is the author of the very popular Beth's blog, How Nonprofits Can Use Social Media. She's also CEO of Zoetica, and works with nonprofits nationwide developing social media and marketing strategies, and the co-author of a recently published and very useful guide, The Network Nonprofit. And Mark provides communications and social media consulting for a lot of nonprofits and cultural institutions. He's the author of the very informative Orchestras and Social Media Survey, and ebook Orchestras and New Media, a complete guide. Has worked for the Chicago Symphony and developed a lot of their early online initiatives. And I'm, again, Oliver Tile with the San Francisco Symphony, and working in a communications department of a very large orchestra, large nonprofit. You know, we realized early on, a few years back, that the landscape was changing. The media landscape was changing very much, and it was dramatically shifting away from traditional get your message out through traditional media, top-down, one-way communication towards a conversation. And obviously that's a conversation that we as an arts organization want to be a part of and drive. And so we jumped in rather early and experimented with a lot of ways, and we have a successful Facebook page and Twitter feed, YouTube, videos, podcasts. We work with Foursquare. We even created our own section on our main website, a social network that aggregates content and allows people to post, and for us to post and aggregate a lot of the content from the other social media channels, and really is now an important part of our online experience and ways for our patrons not just to get information but to share it with those around them. Today I'd love to cover 3 areas with Beth and Marcel, of course. The big picture, which is really cementing the argument as to why it's so important to be a network orchestra in the long run, and it's the long run. Number 2, the cultural shift required, and some of the experimentation going on in that shift. And then in the end, talk about the results. How do we measure success? What does success mean? And how do we think about things like ROI for this type of engagement? And then we'll have some room for questions at the end, of course. Before we start, it might be great to get some information about you all. And Beth and Mark, jump in if there's anything I don't cover. How many of you are from organizations that currently use social media in some form? Great. How many of you have a Facebook page, Twitter feed, use blogs or podcasts? Okay. How many of you are the ones responsible for that social media content or strategy in your organization? Okay, so good amount. Anything else that we want to ask them?
Oh, how many of you think that you're using it effectively? I spent my early part of my career in nonprofits working for orchestras. My first job was with the Boston Symphony. And I was just reminiscing with Oliver. In those days, I was doing development office research, and I went to the library and looked people up on microfiche. What a concept. And in the newspapers, boy, things have changed. So I'm going to start with a definition of what is a networked orchestra or a networked nonprofit. So first of all, which is in the book, I should be looking, because we put these together. This is called PowerPoint karaoke. I'm not quite sure what's coming up. So it's from the book. And so what is a network nonprofit? Contrary to popular belief, it's not an orchestra or a nonprofit, with an internet connection, or one with a Facebook profile, or one that tweets. Although those are important tools to being a network nonprofit. So the definition is a organization that is simple and transparent, that makes it easy for insiders to get out and outsiders to get in. And they're also experts at using social media. So let's step back a moment, and you may be saying, well, so why is that so important? Why should we bother doing that? So if we take a look out in the nonprofit sector, and we look at the data over the last 20 years or so, we'll see that there's been an explosion in the number of nonprofit institutions. And I heard yesterday, speaking to a group of arts councils, they told me that Americans for the Arts has a statistic that says every 3 hours a new nonprofit arts organization is born. It's a lot. So as you can see, this is the last 20 years. I think the number's doubled in the number of nonprofits. And there's also been an emphasis from funders in growing single institutions bigger and more complex to do everything. But yet, if we look out there on different social problems, we haven't really moved the needle on anything. So that's why we think that nonprofits and orchestras, being nonprofits, need to work more like networks. That the harsh economic environment that we're working in and the scaling of social problems that are out there to solve, or even getting people to appreciate classical music and the role it plays in our civil society, you know, that challenge is just far too complex for one single institution to do it. And that's why the thesis of our book is that nonprofits need to work less like institutions and more like networks. You don't need to just be on Facebook. You gotta work like Facebook in a way. So, so that's the reason. So let's just take a quick look at what that means organizationally. Oh, before I go there, I will tell you that in the book we lay out a framework for how to become a network nonprofit. And it's not necessarily an easy transition, but there's basically two columns, the being column and the doing column. Now the being column is all the hard stuff. You know, it's the changing the way we work to work in a more networked way as opposed to an institution. It's simplifying. It's gaining trust through transparency. It's the listening and engaging and building relationships out there on social networks. And it's also creating a social culture so that it's not just the marketing communications department that are using these tools, but also programs and artistic staff and literally the whole organization. Before we can get to the doing, which is all the fun stuff, the poking and the pinging and the friending and the clinging and the clanging and you name it. And if you've ever heard someone say, you know, our organization tried Facebook or we tried Twitter and it just didn't work, it's because they didn't go through the being before the doing. So let's take it down to the ground a little bit further, and we are going to look at what this actually looks like, okay? So if you're not a network to nonprofit, a single institution, your organization may work something like this. So what do you have? You have the staff behind the firewall, working in their cubicles, in their departments, maybe the marketing department not talking to programs, marketing department not talking to development or whatever. So working in isolation, in silos, behind the institutional logo, behind the firewall, reaching in isolation to achieve a goal. So in a networked world in which we're living in, nonprofits need to look less like that and more like that. But going from that to this, it's not easy. Because we're talking about organizational and culture change. And that's hard work. Think about it as an individual. Think about it when we say, I'm gonna start exercising. I'm gonna stop eating chocolate. I'm gonna stop yelling at my kids. Change is hard, but imagine turning and changing a whole organization of people working in a particular way to a new way in order to be successful with these tools. So let's take a look. Oh, there was a it was a what?
The social media earthquake, everybody. It was staged. It's okay.
It was an earthquake. Interesting. Okay, but my first earthquake. Okay, so what do we have?
I told you the landscape was changing.
Okay. This is changing. So, it was that profound a statement. Okay, deep breath. Okay. Okay, so what we have behind the firewall, we have the staff, instead of working in isolation, working as cross-matrix teams, but we also have them reaching out to their individual and personal networks. How many of you have Gen Ys working in your organizations? You know, how many know what we're asking? What's a Gen Y? Okay, someone in their 20s. They naturally work and they're connected because that's the way they do their work. And I heard one of them say, if you prevent me from reaching Facebook while I'm at work, you've cut off my arm. I can't do my job. So you have that happening. You have the institution becoming a little bit more transparent, the firewall maybe will move an inch or two and becomes more porous, allowing staff to go out and connect with those outsiders. And who are those outsiders? Those are your audiences, your donors, those younger audiences that you all want to come into the concert hall, and connecting to them and their networks, as well as other institutions, your peers and their networks, all reaching together for a goal. So if you go back to the being and the doing, the good news is, while there are certain nonprofits that are born as network nonprofits, you know, it's kind of an accident of birth, mostly those that have been founded by younger people that are sort of used to working this way. Those that are from organizations that have been around for a while, maybe 100 years, maybe 50, you can change. You have to have patience and take slow steps, but it is possible. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark.
Yeah, in 2009, I sent around a survey to, what was it, about 50 orchestras, mostly the top 50 orchestras in budget size. I got about 15 responses, so keep that in mind when you see these results. I think it's more informative than authoritative. But I think there's definitely some good lessons in there, and looking around the room when the hands went up with the earlier questions, I definitely think it translates very well to what is actually happening. What I found with that survey, well, first of all, the survey results came back, and the orchestras that responded were all orchestras with a budget higher than $2.5 million. So group 1, 2, and 3, according to the League of American Orchestras. So keep that in mind as well, that this survey looks at orchestras with somewhat of a higher budget than some of the organizations here, I'm assuming. But what I found was that, in short, many activities, many are dipping their toes into the water, but not strategically. They're not quite sure yet. A different study, a Weber Shandwick, a PR firm study, they did a study for nonprofits, and they found that 85% of nonprofits are planning to do more in social media over the next year. But on the other hand, about 80% also had yet to determine the true value of social media. So from my study, looking at that bigger background, and from my study, I think the key recommendation that I had was formalizing. Formalizing your plan, your staff, your budget. And this doesn't mean, formalizing doesn't mean spending $100,000, spending $10,000, spending $5,000. It's as long as you formalize what you want to do. So, don't just do it. Do it with thought behind it.